My name is Sophia Bennett, and sometimes life has a way of circling back in the most ironic ways. This morning, as I sat in my corner office overlooking the Manhattan skyline, the buzz of my phone interrupted the quiet hum of success I've built around me. A legal email sat waiting in my inbox, crisp, formal, almost begging. They need my signature. I let the words linger in my mind, rolling them slowly, like the taste of a rich Cabernet. The very same people who once turned their backs on me, who laughed at my dreams, who dismissed me as if I were nothing more than a foolish girl with too much hope and not enough sense, now they couldn't move forward without me. The irony wasn't lost on me. I leaned back in my leather chair, the silk of my blouse cool against my skin. My hand hovered over the sleek Montblanc pen that rested on the mahogany desk, a gift I once bought for myself after closing my first big deal. The city below was alive with its usual chaos: honking cabs, hurried footsteps, voices rising and fading in the streets. Yet here in my office, there was only silence. My lips curved into a slow smile. It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't even revenge. It was something sharper, cleaner: vindication. Because years ago, I had invited them into my world. I had opened a door for them to stand beside me. And they refused. Now they stood outside another door. One they couldn't enter unless I chose to let them. And the key was my signature. I can still remember the night as if it's been stitched into the lining of my memory. It was my senior year of college, and I had worked for weeks preparing for that moment. I had saved enough to rent a small event space near campus, nothing fancy, just string lights, folding chairs, and a cheap sound system. But to me, it was everything. It was my first attempt at something big. Pitching a small startup idea I had been nurturing in between classes and late-night study sessions. My dream was to launch a lifestyle brand, sustainable, affordable, rooted in creativity. I was terrified, but proud enough to send out invitations. I invited my family. I thought, foolishly, that they would be there. My parents, my older brother Ethan, even my cousins who always seemed to have opinions about my life. I wanted them to see me, to understand me, not just as the quiet girl in the background, but as a woman who had something worth building. But the replies trickled in, sharp and dismissive. It's not really our thing. You should focus on getting a real job. Don't get carried away with these little hobbies. The night of my presentation, I kept glancing at the door, hoping maybe, just maybe, they would surprise me. But the door never opened. My hands shook as I clicked through slides, my throat tight as I tried to project confidence to a half-empty room filled mostly with classmates and one sympathetic professor. And when it was over, when the polite applause faded, I ducked into the restroom and stared at myself in the mirror. Mascara smudged, palms damp, chest aching with disappointment, so heavy I thought it might crush me. That's when my grandmother, Margaret Bennett, called. She had received my invitation too. She couldn't travel from Florida at her age, but her voice carried more warmth than the entire empty room I had just left behind. Don't let their absence define you, Sophia, she told me. Some doors are meant to close so you can build your own house. And when you do, they'll be the ones knocking. I clung to her words like a lifeline. Before we hung up, she reminded me of the fountain pen she had given me years earlier for my 16th birthday. I had tucked it away, thinking it was too precious to use. That night, I pulled it from its box. Heavy in my hand, it felt like more than a pen, it felt like a promise. So I made one to myself. If no one else believed in me, I would believe in me. That was the night I walked out of that little event space, heartbroken but determined. The night I stopped asking for a seat at their table and started building my own. The years that followed were anything but easy. I left that small campus event with nothing but a crumpled notebook of ideas, a secondhand laptop that overheated every few hours, and my grandmother's fountain pen tucked into my bag. For months, I worked 3 different part-time jobs: waitressing at night, tutoring high school kids on weekends, and doing admin work for a local office during the day. Every paycheck was split between rent, student loans, and scraps of savings I guarded fiercely for my dream. It wasn't glamorous. My first office was a cluttered corner of my studio apartment, with paint peeling on the walls and a desk I had dragged off a sidewalk. I survived on instant ramen and dollar coffee. And yet, in that tiny space, something grew. I taught myself everything I didn't know. Web design through YouTube tutorials, business accounting through late-night library books, marketing from endless trial and error. My eyes burned from staring at the screen, my fingers ached from typing until dawn, and my confidence wavered more times than I cared to admit. But then small wins began to trickle in. The first time a stranger ordered one of my handmade products online, I sat in shock staring at the notification, tears blurring the screen. The package was so simple, brown paper, twine, and a handwritten thank you note, but it felt like proof that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't delusional. I remember my first real client meeting too. It was in a shabby cafe downtown, with flickering lights and sticky tables. The woman across from me, a boutique owner named Rachel Moore, saw something in my ideas. She listened carefully, nodded slowly, and at the end of our conversation said, "You've got grit, Sophia. I like that. Let's give this a shot." That one deal turned into 2, then 5, then 10. I reinvested every dollar back into the business, upgrading my equipment, paying for legal paperwork, expanding my product line. And through it all, I never told my family the full truth. When they asked how I was doing, I kept my answers vague. "Oh, just keeping busy. Nothing major yet." I learned quickly that hiding my progress spared me their criticism. They still thought of me as the girl chasing childish hobbies. Let them think it, I decided. I owed them nothing. Years passed, and the business grew like a secret garden behind locked gates. One day, I realized I had crossed an invisible line, no longer scraping by, but thriving. I moved into a sleek apartment in New York City. My company had an actual office space, a small but passionate team, and investors who believed in the brand. The moment that sealed it for me happened late one night. I had just finished negotiating a deal with a major retailer, the kind of deal that could change everything. I pulled out my grandmother's fountain pen, the same one I had once held in trembling hands, and signed my name at the bottom of that contract. The ink flowed smooth and steady, as if it had been waiting for that exact moment. I sat there afterward, staring at the signature. I thought of that empty room years ago, the silence of my family's rejection, and my grandmother's words, "One day, they'll be the ones knocking." I hadn't realized until then how right she was. Because success, I discovered, is best built quietly, so when the world finally notices, it has no choice but to be stunned. It happened on an ordinary Thursday afternoon, the kind where the world felt busy but predictable. I was reviewing reports in my office when my assistant, Jenna, stepped in. She held a sleek envelope with the kind of embossed lettering you usually only see in law firms. "It's from your family," she said gently, as if bracing me for impact. I took the envelope, my fingers tracing the heavy paper. The Bennett family crest was stamped on the flap, something they had always been so proud of, as if our name itself carried currency. For me, it carried only the weight of memory. Inside, the letter was cold and formal. Legal jargon filled the page, but the message was simple. My parents, my brother Ethan, and a few extended relatives needed my signature to finalize the sale of a piece of family property. Without me, without my consent, the deal couldn't go through. I let the paper fall onto my desk. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the skyline. A slow smile crept across my face. So this was it. The full circle. Later that week, they came to see me. When they arrived at my office, I could almost hear their disbelief echoing through the marble lobby. The receptionist guided them into the private elevator, the one that required a special keycard. I waited upstairs, calm and composed, my heart pounding only once when I heard the faint ding of the doors opening. They filed in slowly, my mother, impeccably dressed as always, my father, stiff and proud even in unfamiliar territory, Ethan, avoiding my eyes. Behind them trailed 2 of my cousins, whispering in hushed tones as if they had stepped into another universe. Because, in a way, they had. The office wasn't ostentatious, but it radiated quiet power. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, reflecting off polished wood and sleek steel. Modern art hung on the walls, pieces I had chosen not for their price tags, but because they spoke to me. A shelf displayed awards and framed magazine covers, not to boast, but to remind me how far I had come. They looked around, stunned into silence. Finally, my mother found her voice. "Sophia, this is impressive." Her tone tried to sound supportive, but I caught the thin edge of disbelief. I gestured toward the conference table. "Please sit." They obeyed, their movements stiff, uncertain. I let the silence stretch a little longer, enjoying the rare moment where their certainty faltered and mine stood tall. "So," I began, folding my hands on the table, "you need my signature." Ethan cleared his throat.
Yes.
"It's just a formality, really. We're selling the old estate, and because your name is on the deed." "My name is on the deed," I repeated slowly, letting the words sink in. "Funny. You all once made sure I knew I had no place in the family's plans. And yet here we are. You can't move forward without me." Their faces shifted, discomfort, shame, a flicker of defensiveness. My father leaned forward. "Sophia, this isn't the time to dwell on the past. This is business." I met his gaze steadily. "Everything is business when it comes to you. But for me, this is personal." The silence that followed was thick. I rose from my chair, walking toward the tall windows. The city stretched out below, alive and relentless. I turned back to them, my voice calm but unyielding. "You see, I invited you once. Years ago.
To support me. To stand by me.
You refused. You made it clear I wasn't worth your time. Now you sit here needing my approval. My signature." I returned to the table, lifted my grandmother's fountain pen, and held it delicately between my fingers. Their eyes followed it, almost hypnotized. "This pen," I said softly, "was a gift from the only person who ever truly believed in me. And I don't sign anything unless I believe it serves me and the values I stand for." Their silence was answer enough. Shame etched into the lines of their faces, their pride folding in on itself. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. They weren't in control anymore. I was. I let the silence hang between us, heavy and unrelenting. My family, the people who once couldn't be bothered to show up for me, now sat waiting for my decision, their future tied to the weight of my pen. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one begging for a seat at their table.
They were sitting at mine.
I leaned back in my chair, twirling the fountain pen lightly in my hand. "Here's the truth," I said finally. "I could sign this document right now and make all of this easy for you. But easy isn't what you gave me, is it?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Sophia, come on. That was years ago." "Exactly." I cut in sharply. "Years ago, when I needed encouragement, you mocked me. When I asked for support, you refused my invitation. You treated me like a child chasing fantasies. And yet here I am, running a company you couldn't even dream of building." My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. My father's jaw tightened. They weren't used to me holding the floor, but I wasn't about to let them interrupt. "So, if you want my signature," I continued, my voice steady, "you'll meet my conditions." Their eyes darted toward one another, pride battling desperation. But they said nothing. "First," I said, turning to Ethan, "you've coasted your whole life on entitlement. If I sign this paper, you're going to invest your share into something that isn't about you. A scholarship fund, a community program, something that forces you to give back. No excuses." He started to protest, but the glare I gave him shut it down. "Second," I said, locking eyes with my mother, "you taught me early on that appearances mattered more than truth. That image was everything. If you want my cooperation, you'll stop hiding behind your pearls and perfect smile. I want honesty, transparency. With me, with yourself. No more pretending we're some flawless family when we're not." Her face flushed, but she stayed silent. "And third," I said, turning to my father, "you built your life on control, on silencing others so your voice could be the only one in the room. If I sign, that stops here. You will acknowledge me, not as your daughter who got lucky, but as the woman who built something without you. I won't tolerate anything less." The room was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. Finally, I set the pen down on the table, deliberately, like a gavel sealing judgment. These are my terms. Not because I crave revenge. Not because I want to watch you squirm. But because if I put my name on that document, it means I'm choosing to stand with you. And I refuse to stand with the same people who once refused me, unless something changes. Ethan looked down at his hands. My mother blinked back tears. My father's stare, usually sharp as steel, flickered with something unfamiliar. Humility. It wasn't victory I felt in that moment. It wasn't triumph. It was balance. The scales finally even. I folded my hands together and said the words that sealed it. When you're ready to honor these conditions, I'll sign. Until then, the door remains closed. The power was mine. And for once, they knew it. The days that followed were strangely quiet. I expected more resistance, more arguing, more attempts to push back. But instead, I received silence, the kind of silence that comes when people are forced to sit with the truth. Then slowly something began to shift. Ethan was the first to reach out. A short, awkward message popped up on my phone. I've been researching nonprofit programs. Found one for underprivileged kids that might actually work.
Can we talk?
For the first time, his words didn't drip with arrogance. They sounded genuine. My mother followed, calling late one evening. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. I don't know how to be transparent, Sophia, she admitted. But I want to try. I don't want to keep pretending everything's perfect when it isn't. And then there was my father. He didn't say much, not at first. But when he finally walked into my office again, he extended his hand.
His voice was low, rough.
You've built something remarkable. I should have said that years ago. I shook his hand, feeling the weight of decades settle between us. It wasn't an apology wrapped in ribbons, but it was something. When I finally picked up my grandmother's fountain pen to sign the papers, it wasn't out of anger, or bitterness, or even triumph. It was out of choice. My choice. The ink flowed across the page just as it had on every contract before this one, smooth, unwavering. And as I set the pen down, I thought of her words. One day, they'll be the ones knocking. She had been right all along. Later that night, I stood by my window, the city glittering beneath me. My reflection stared back, not the trembling girl from years ago, but a woman who had carved her own path, brick by brick, scar by scar. I realized then that the most powerful part of this journey wasn't that my family now needed me. It was that I no longer needed them. The closure wasn't in their shame or their newfound humility. It was in knowing that I had risen, with or without them. As I turned off the lights and prepared to leave, I whispered softly, almost as if my grandmother were still listening. They refused my invite then, but today my signature is the only key to their future. And for the first time in a very long time, that truth didn't ache. It felt like freedom.